All right, let's do this. I'm Elliot with your GRE question of the day. And today we're working on this paragraph argument assumption question. We know it's an assumption question, really tricky part here, because we're going to read the question stem first so we know what type of question we're up against. It says, which of the following is an assumption on which the argument depends? So we're going to be looking for some missing link between the argument and the correct answer. We'll give you a minute to read, but before we do, really important reminder, remember your goal while you're reading is to identify the conclusion of the argument, that is, the main point that the person who wrote this is trying to convince us of. Once you've got that conclusion, you can either go ahead and evaluate the answers if you feel confident about doing that, or unpause me and we will walk through it together. All right, so where is the conclusion of the argument? This one is a nice example to remind us that the conclusion doesn't necessarily go at the end. Now, in most cases, we'd be looking for some key word like therefore or so to indicate to us that the author's conclusion is what's going to come next. But we don't get that kind of a keyword, so we're going to fall back on a secondary but equally effective method for finding the conclusion. Basically, what we know is we've got the conclusion and we've got some premises or some evidence for the conclusion. That's the entirety of what makes up the passage that we are reading. So the evidence, the premises, is going to be facts, or at least sound a little bit more like facts. The conclusion, or the main point of this passage, is going to be the part that sounds like an opinion. So I ask you, is there a word in here that clearly indicates to you where the author's opinion is? Yes, exactly. Should. Should is a really terrific word to indicate to us that we are looking at somebody's opinion, right? It says the town council should repeal the ordinance prohibiting the use of bicycles on the sidewalk. That is what we will call our conclusion. This is really key because when we're evaluating answers, we want the one that relates to the conclusion in the most direct way. Okay, so the town council should repeal the prohibition against bicycles on the sidewalk because it says it's rarely enforced anyway. Bicycles are using the sidewalk anyway, and it's not really causing problems because there haven't really been accidents between bicycles and pedestrians, the argument says. So we have an assumption question. Before we evaluate the list, let me give you another really valuable tip here that you've got to know. Assumption always means the same two things on the GRE. An assumption's got to be, first of all, unstated. It's something that isn't written right there in the text. And secondly, an assumption is always something that is required. It basically has to be true in order for the conclusion to make sense. And that's a really high standard, right? That it basically has to be true because now we can be really proactive with the process of elimination, okay? So we're going to look through the list of answers and we're going to ask ourselves, would this really have to be true? Not just does it agree with the conclusion or add a little bit more support to the conclusion, but basically if this is not true, then the conclusion of the argument would fall apart. That is the one that will be our correct answer. So let's see this in action. A says the bicyclists themselves will be safer on the sidewalks than on the town streets. Are we comparing safety on the sidewalks versus safety on the streets? No, we're really not. And does answer choice A directly address whether or not the ordinance should be repealed? No, I think this is a pretty big failure. We're going to eliminate answer choice A. B says bicycles on the sidewalk are no more dangerous than electric scooters on the sidewalk. Classic GRE wrong answer on paragraph argument. It brings in some brand new terms, that the electric scooters in this case, that really don't have anything to do with what we were talking about in the passage. So comparing against electric scooters, certainly not required. That doesn't have to be true for the conclusion to follow. Let's eliminate that. Answer choice C says bicyclists will not use the sidewalks in significantly greater numbers once such behavior is legalized. Now, let's think about that. If we repeal the ordinance and a lot more bicyclists start using the sidewalks, Could that change things? Could that maybe make it more dangerous or cause more arguments? Yeah, that seems pretty reasonable. So this one is directly addressing whether or not we should repeal the ordinance. Maybe you know it's the right answer right away, but even if not, remember, we're practicing process of elimination here. So we'll just say for now that we'll keep that one and we'll keep evaluating answers and find out whether it's really the best one. Answer choice D says a similar law pertaining to skateboard use has already been repealed. If you weren't familiar with this before, you are now, just like the electric scooters, right? What does skateboard use have to do with it or some other similar law? We're really only concerned with whether or not we should repeal this ordinance about bicycles on sidewalks. Let's get rid of answer choice D. And lastly, answer choice E says the town's bicyclists are more concerned with personal safety than with municipal law. Does whether bicyclists are concerned with personal safety or municipal law tell us whether we should repeal the ordinance or not? Sort of only very loosely related in kind of an indirect way. Would you agree with me about that? I hope you would, because we're going to eliminate that one too. So answer choice C is really the only one that gives us something that really needs to be true in order for the conclusion to follow. In other words, that the law isn't already having a positive effect. It's not keeping more bicyclists from using the sidewalks. So we are going to all agree this is the assumption. Answer choice C is correct. Great job, team. If you struggled with that a little or you're not totally satisfied with the explanation you're seeing here, I hope you'll reach out to me. You can always ask some more questions or get more help getting ready for the GRE in any way that you need. The best way to reach me is Instagram. I'm at Herson Test Prep. I hope to hear from you soon. And until we meet again on another GRE question of the day, happy studying.